Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Negotiation. In this episode, we bring back one of our favorite guests, Bill Tung, Managing Director at Peaks Consulting. As we start to branch out and discuss the broader APAC landscape, we asked Bill about his background of helping Rockport and The Body Shop grow across the APAC region in the 1990s and early 2000s, and diving into his expertise on marketing outdoor apparel and equipment to the Asia Pacific consumers. We also cover topics like the common mistakes brands make doing this, optimizing your organizational structure to thrive in foreign markets, and how to prepare for complaints and returns operating in an overseas market. Enjoy.
Listen, nobody wants to have multiple styles and SKUs. You know, if you can just sell one product around the world, it makes life incredibly easier and efficient. And I suppose if you're selling, frozen peas or soybeans, you can do so. Not that I'm an expert in agriculture, but when you're selling apparel and footwear or personal care products, it's cultures, histories, and consumers are very different around the world. And I think that when you ignore that or don't want to address that, then that's when you run into problems.
Home to over 4 billion people, the Asia Pacific region boasts one of the most powerful consumer markets on the planet. Not only is it home to half of the world's under 30 population, but it's also home to more than half the world's internet users. It's a market that no globally minded organization should ignore. But entering markets like China, Japan, or Southeast Asia is no easy task. Just ask the likes of Microsoft, Google, Uber, and Facebook. However, times are changing, and with the right partners, doors are slowly opening as more and more companies find success growing their key markets in APAC. I myself spent 8 years in China, mostly as a venture capitalist, helping early-stage tech companies grow in the Asia-Pacific market successfully. This show is dedicated to uncovering and examining successful Asia market entry and growth strategies by interviewing the experts who've done it before and truly understand what it takes to be successful in the region. My name is Todd Embley, and welcome to The Negotiation, brought to you by WPIC Marketing and Technologies. Bill, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Todd. It's been a while, and always welcome. Look forward to speaking with you. Thanks.
Yeah, that's right. We had you on before, and our audience has grown a ton. And since we did the audio original, we were just doing all the audio for the podcast, and now we're back. We're doing video. We've got the YouTube channel for those who want to go check us out. If you're only listening on audio, of course, WPIC at the YouTube channel. That's where our live video recording is going to be living now. And it was February of 2021.
Wow.
So you and I were discussing, well, how long has it been? Has it been a year? Actually, it's been more. It's been longer. I think COVID did that to all of us. All time just stretched and became elongated without us really knowing it. So we're going to assume, based on that timeline, that most of the audience listening or watching this interview potentially hasn't come across that original episode. So I'll advise everybody here today, if you're really, really interested in knowing more and want to get that first iteration of our discussion, go back and hunt down. I'm going to be doing this a lot. I'm going to be sending a lot of people back to the podcast and go hunt down some of these amazing interviews that we did before, like the one we did with you in February of 2021. But for those who don't know you and haven't heard you before, let's first start with a bit of your background. Let's give a little, 10-year synopsis of what you've been doing and the work you've been doing, helping brands succeed in APAC recently.
Yeah, I think, if I went back 10 years, Todd, it was mostly my time at Columbia Sportswear as the vice president of international and really doing business responsible for the markets all encompassing outside of the United States. So covering Europe, Middle East, Africa, Asia Pacific, and Latin America and Canada as well. And then I moved on to New Balance here in Boston. That very much similar role doing that. That was for a brief stint. And then at a company called Fanatics that has the license for the NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, and other sports assets, and starting up their international division. But right now I'm focusing my time on consulting with brands, companies in the apparel and footwear space, more on the smaller and medium size, and just helping them with their international expansion strategy, should they be setting up subsidiaries, distributors, agents, franchisees, and how should they go about doing that? How should they structure their internal organization to optimize and to think globally with that mindset? So setting up that strategy and then helping them execute that strategy in select markets around the world where they need help.
Yeah. Well, and it's such an interesting space. I come from it, and a lot of listeners previously would know a little bit about my background working with startups. I come from kind of VC startup land, that kind of thing, working a lot with entrepreneurs and the things, it's the explosion, even in just independent indie footwear or apparel, what you're doing now. And the amount of small to medium businesses that are now growing, Correct. That are looking, Correct. It's not just the big Nikes and Adidas anymore. So many of these amazing small brands that are coming out, and things like Shopify and things have really kind of like just allowed Stripes and things, right? The explosion of the creator and the artist and the ability to actually build and grow a brand and doing these things. So all that work, super fascinating space that you were in, and then how you've been able to just really go independent to cover so many needs for so many new people in the space. And we're going to get to that. However, and I asked you for a background that was 10 years. And here I actually want to talk a little bit about, things that were even 20 years ago. Okay. I want to go back to Rockport, right? You were brought in to help Rockport grow in APAC. And so I want to dive into that work that you were doing in Tokyo for a couple of years. What was it like, your first efforts in understanding and trying to market to consumers in Japan?
Yeah, a good question, Todd. The footwear industry, especially the brown shoe or the dress shoe industry, which Rockport plays in, is a fairly conservative industry, and certainly in Japan, a very conservative industry as well. So certainly taking an American brand based here in Boston and trying to implement its products and its marketing into Japan, we certainly had its great challenges, and certainly from a product standpoint. There wasn't really an issue with the product, with the styling standpoint, but the Japanese consumer have different feet, Todd, lo and behold. So it's about the last, which shoe dogs and footwear manufacturers call the last. And certainly the Japanese foot tends to be a bit wider fit. The ball of the foot tends to be higher, and that's pretty typical in Asia itself. So accommodations had to be made of what type of styles would we be selling in Japan, and the last and the size and width of those products. But also, Japan, people take their shoes off. Restaurants, homes, so slip-on loafers became very, very popular, or very, was more the norm than traditional tie laced-up shoes. Not that doesn't exist, but the loafer is just much more, just a bigger percentage of the total sale. So you need to be aware of those and make those shifts.
I had no idea. No, they're
not. Yeah.
All feet are not created equal. It's lessons learned with Bill Tung. That's amazing. But I mean, it makes sense. I guess I probably just never thought about it before. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The entire makeup of the product would probably have to change. Okay, so specifically, then let's talk about some of the lessons from that experience. Some of the lessons that are timeless, the things that you've learned, you're still applying to how you operate and consult today.
Number one, know thy consumer. And I think for a lot of American companies, Canadian companies as well, but I think this is ubiquitous, quite frankly, somewhat universal, Todd, in the fact that, you have your home country bias. And these are our top selling styles in our home country. So, for sure, they would be our top selling styles in Paris and in Tokyo as well. Well, why not? They're our best selling styles in our home market. And, this is a marketing campaign that was so successful here in our home market. We'll just translate that verbatim sometimes, and we'll just do the same thing in France as we do in Japan. And I think that's where a lot of companies just fall into these traps of, it's a bit of naivete. To be a bit unkind, it's a bit of ignorance or hubris, just to thinking, well, this is what we made us successful here. surely it should make us successful in these other countries as well. So it's when you fail to understand the consumers that you're trying to sell to, that gets a lot of companies into trouble, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. So let's move past that. Let's go into Body Shop. Okay, so out of Rockport, now you move into the Body Shop, totally different vertical. Now, I'm imagining that you still have a lot of products that are focused on foot, and you moved as well. You weren't in Japan. You moved over to Hong Kong, right? And you were responsible for several markets inside Greater China as well as Japan and Korea, okay? And as many people listening to the podcast probably know, consumers in Hong Kong and consumers in Japan are very, very different, right? We have a very savvy audience. We probably understand, at least by now, and hopefully this podcast has helped them understand that consumers, in Japan, in Korea, in Hong Kong, Greater China, they are all very, very different, okay? So did you find were there any difficulties in what you were trying to do in running that market from outside, being not in Japan, not in Korea, based in Hong Kong? What kind of difficulties were you facing due to physical location?
Yeah, well, I traveled to Tokyo quite a bit, Todd. And the interesting Body Shop at that time was an English company. And I think it's now owned by L'Oreal or somebody. But, so selling in Japan, hundreds of stores in Japan. So a very successful business operated with an exclusive franchisee there. Without exception, almost every product from shampoo to vitamin C to mango body butters were modified for the Japanese market. Personal care, by definition, very personal. The reason for that, we had a partner in Tokyo that just really believed that the products that were coming out of the UK were not made or maybe not appropriate for the Japanese consumer. And this goes into, Todd, what some people will call the myth of Japanese uniqueness. And I would say ignore that at your peril. Almost without exception, every product before it was launched in Japan, was tested and modified. The formulation, whether it was scent or astringency, pH value, acidity value, I could go on and on. So the partner in Japan was very sophisticated. They really knew the consumer, but it really put a lot of stress on the R&D process back in the UK, and certainly the manufacturing process back in the UK. So, and it was very revealing just throughout that process. I recall very much launching a new shampoo in Tokyo. And even without testing the product on Japanese consumers, the feedback was, well, you need to modify that product because, it's going to be too astringent for the Japanese consumers because, the Japanese consumers are shampooing their hair every day. So it's going to be too strong for their hair. So, they just didn't. Yeah. So it was very interesting that we had to make some product modifications from shampoo to vitamin C to mango body butters. We just went on and on and on.
I can only imagine. And I just want to revisit what you said, ignoring the personality differences or at least, the consumer personal differences at your peril. I couldn't agree more. And I think it's really, really smart. It bears repeating repeatedly, constantly, because it is so, so important. Now, let's talk a little bit about the gender specifics of, a lot of what you're doing. How do you, as somebody who consults and works with brands, how do you deal with something like if we were to say that Body Shop, and you can agree or disagree, first of all, was Body Shop targeting female audiences? Mostly, if not exclusively.
Emphatically, yes.
Okay. So how does, I know that data is data. It is binary, right? It is neither, male or female, right? It is non-binary. It is so now when you are working in that industry and you are helping brands target a specific audience that isn't you, how, and I think that just leads into, how do you work? Like how do you market hockey apparel if you don't play hockey? How do you market, products to women and not being like, what kind of work do you do? How do you overcome a lack of intuitiveness when you're doing your work?
Hire people who know and have that experience of if you're marketing to women, here's the really bright idea, Todd, hire women marketeers.
Shocking.
So certainly, and retail is detail. So it is certainly in personal care, is very, very much dominated by women in senior roles. The founder of Body Shop was a woman, and certainly the head of the Japanese franchisee was a lady. So a lot, as I recall, the people in the regional office was very much women as well. So you need to be in tune with the culture and the DNA as well. I mean, for myself, I wasn't there, dictating marketing campaigns, how to market to a female consumer. My job is just to really just execute and put the dots together.
Right. Retail is detail.
Yeah.
I love that. Can you explain more about that quip?
I think I'll put it this way. When you're doing wholesaling business and you're selling your goods, whether it's to Neiman Marcus or to Macy's or to Walmart, somebody related to that as shooting a movie where you've got a schedule, you've got a timeline, you've got a script, but you can do takes. The lighting's not right. Cut, take two, cut, he flubbed the lines, cut, take two, take three, and you can do many edits along the way in shooting a movie, equating that to wholesale. When you're doing retail, it's like a stage play. It's a stage performance. It's live. The audience there is in front of you. If you flub your lines, you don't do a good performance, they throw eggs and tomatoes at you. Not anymore, but the word gets out and nobody comes anymore. So it's live. How are you presenting your products? How are you doing your customer service? So it's that attention to detail that's live with consumers when you open the door that becomes very, very important.
Let's move on now to your work with the Columbia Sportswear. Was it about 13 years there? Something like that?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a lot to unpack there and a lot of insights to learn from all your time there. But just from a kind of a high level, 30,000 foot macro type of level, maybe we can talk just a little bit about that space, okay? Outdoor apparel and equipment in APAC. Not the first region that comes to mind when people think about outdoor, or even though Everest is located there, typify the big outdoor sports enthusiasts from that region of the world, okay? Things have changed. Can you talk a little bit about how outdoor apparel and equipment market has changed and evolved in APAC over the 13 years that you were at Columbia Sportswear?
Yeah, in the beginning, Todd, when I started, Columbia was in Japan, was in Korea, was not in China. And this was 2003, 2004. The thinking, China was early days at that time. None of the big global outdoor brands were in China yet. The thought was you source your products from China, you sell to these consumers. And then not a lot of brands really thought that was an opportunity. Nike and Adidas, the athletic brands, had been in for quite some time and really just laying the foundations of their brands. So it was interesting. I went into China, met with a bunch of retailers, that were selling sporting goods. They were well aware of Columbia. I mean, these guys travel around the world and they go to trade shows, and they're well aware of Columbia and the other brands. But, the general consensus at the time was, well, nobody's skiing, nobody's snowboarding, nobody's camping, nobody's trail running, all these outdoor activities that were being done in other countries. Really, it just was not starting yet in China. And I thought, okay, well, fine. Well, then let's start anyway, and we can start to build the market and do marketing and basically promote the great outdoors in China. So we did start with Swire Resources, a partner based in Hong Kong that had significant experience with other brands in China. So we started in department stores. We started shops in the tier 1 cities, Beijing, Shanghai, if you will. And then we started to sponsor outdoor events, outdoor trail running events, what was like camping, some of the few ski slopes that did exist up in northern China, sponsoring those ski slopes, just promoting the brands and activities. So it was like you helping to build the market. And so you said most brands wouldn't think about Asia, but I think for most brands, certainly China, Japan, and Korea would certainly be in the top 5, certainly in the top 10 for any brands around the world. Korea, oddly enough, most people sort of oversee Korea. 50 million people there, squeezed between China and Japan. I think at one point was the world's 3rd largest outdoor apparel market after the United States and Germany. And he says, well, how could that be? It's just because the propensity of people to spend a lot of money on outdoor apparel was very, very high. So you need to uncover these nuggets around the world and spend time on the ground and find out what's going on. So,
yeah, I mean, I think about the function of the product. Right, let's just take a jacket.
Sure, yeah.
Right, it's keep you dry, keep you warm. Right,
that's it.
People all over the world would like to stay dry and would like to stay warm. Right. However, it's marketing that has been like, well, trail running, climbing, camping, outdoor activities, fishing, whatever. This is where we're now blending, right? We're trying to infuse emotion and personal attachment and activity attachment to driving sales. That I would assume has to be rebuilt when you go to places where everything that you've had at your disposal to try to draw on emotion and attachment and brand building doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's a good point, Todd, because so keeping warm and dry, outdoor, right? I mean, those two apply, but it's how you market it to the consumer that becomes a little bit different. In China, it was very much about the technology. They wanted what was the latest and greatest and the newest. Really, they had no issues of paying premium prices for that. There was just that hunger for brands and for a message and a story. Not that that doesn't exist in other markets. It certainly does, of course. But the emphasis was significantly higher in how we marketed the technologies that supported the brand in China. But I also go on to say that for Columbia, the challenge was also tackling size and fit, because as an American company, let's say that the products were more comfortable fits, as you will. And so certainly, just like my Rockport analogy on the footwear, well, certainly then you need to adjust for size and fit of the Asian consumers as well, as we did for Europe also, because I think that became the big challenge for Europeans, especially for sportswear. You had to be much tighter to the body, as Europeans wear clothes a little bit differently than Americans do.
Right. Okay. So, yes, they do. Let's talk a little bit about dissecting the geographies of APAC, right? If you could, we just did it for saying, okay, well, here's Europeans and looser fitting for Americans, something like that. But what about APAC? Can we do the same, or is it all the same? And I know the answer to that, but I'm just putting it out there for emphasis. Japan, Greater China, other Southeast Asia, Indonesia, for instance.
Yeah, what's really interesting, Todd, at Columbia, what we did was we started off small of localizing designs for Japan and Korea initially. So we would certainly use the same technologies that Columbia had, but we would modify the product for size and fit but also in design and also quality of fabrics as well. When I design, I mean the consumer, unlike the United States, tended to be younger and more urban. So you needed to be much more stylish. You needed to be more colorful and just have a higher degree of design for a more of an urban consumer versus the Columbia consumer in the United States that tended to be more suburban, even / rural. So size, fit, design, quality. So at one point, about maybe 70-80% of the collection that was sold in Japan and Korea was designed in Tokyo and in Seoul. And so I think that was a major step for the brand's commitment of investment to really make that leap. Yes, it's a global brand, but very much localized from the product standpoint. And I think that was greatly appreciated by the consumers. Alternatively, and I'll be critical of the company here, the thinking was for Europe, well, we don't really need to modify the product at all. And we'll just, what we sell in the United States, we'll sell in Europe. So I think to this very day, the Asia Pac markets is still probably has higher revenue than it does in Europe, quite frankly.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, the next question and the next talking point I wanted to get to was really talking about failures and leaning in, maybe even just from your Columbia experience and then on, your recent consulting, because like you said, localizing was great. Have product design teams for APAC based in APAC. That's a great thing that you can do. But, what about some of the hard lessons learned, the failures you've seen, brands even that you were competing with? Can you talk some about and I know you're really passionate about this, how are brands typically failing going to APAC?
Yeah, I think they're just assuming just that itself, Todd. It's Asia. Asia looks like this. Europe looks like that. What you do in Japan, what you do in China, well, why can't you do that in Thailand and Indonesia? It's all Asia after all. And I think that's, so it's like, it's like, what's Europe? Are we talking about a consumer in Stockholm or somebody in Rome? Asia, we're talking about a consumer that's in Tokyo or somebody who's in Bangkok. And so just to, I think, again, a bit of naivete, just to make these round globes. Well, that's the Asia Pac region. That's the EMEA or the Europe region. I think it's a bit naive. And you can't, listen, nobody wants to have multiple styles and SKUs. If you can just sell one product around the world, it makes life incredibly easier and efficient. And I suppose if you're selling, frozen peas or soybeans, you can do so. Not that I'm an expert in agriculture, but when you're selling apparel and footwear or personal care products, it's the cultures, histories, and consumers are very different around the world. And I think that when you ignore that or don't want to address that, then that's when you run into problems.
Okay, it gets me thinking about organizational structure. And I think this would be really interesting as far as even before brand owners, brand decision makers that are out there listening, looking to go to anywhere in APAC. Let me ask you, should they be looking inward? Should part of the preparatory process of going to that region being involve looking in the mirror and understanding how they're processed up, because when they, employ and engage someone like yourself, where do you need to be? Who do you need access to in order to be able to do your job properly, to help them be successful, and where your input goes in and where it affects, and how close do you need to be able to inject your input and your consultation to the core areas that you need access to? Can you talk a little bit about organizational structure and the proper and the best kind of way to have an organizational structure to go there and to be working with people like yourselves?
Yeah, good question, Todd. I think whether it's a small, medium, large size company, it really needs the total commitment of the C-suite. of the senior leadership. If you just say, right, we've got this international division and we've got these guys and they're responsible for the markets outside the United States and they're sort of segregated from the rest of the organization, then they're not going to get support from operations, customer service, planning, marketing, merchandising, HR, finance. It really needs to be part and parcel of a global mindset. Otherwise, you're just exporting, Todd. Then you're just thinking about, we're just going to export the widgets that we sell here in the United States. And you can do that. That's fine. But I think that if you really want to have a global business and a global mindset in your organization, it can't be just those handful of people that are responsible primarily for the international markets, and the rest of us are sitting in the C-suite and the home market, and we've got this mentality of domestic sales versus the foreign markets. You really need to look at all of your markets around the world as just it's one market. We've got consumers in Tokyo, we've got consumers in Paris, as we have in Vancouver, as we have in Chicago. And I think that those companies that understand that, end up being much more successful because they have a respect and an understanding that consumers around the world are different, and then how you market to them may need to be different as well. So if you're going to modify product and modify marketing and your messaging, that can't be just left up to a few people that are responsible in the international division. It's got to be throughout the organization.
So we're talking about modifying marketing, we're talking about modifying messaging, but what else should we be talking about? I mean, should we be talking about sizing when it comes to production? Obviously we'll take, the average foot is a size 9, and then we'll, that'll be 50%, and then we'll do 20% size 10 and 20% size 8, and then, packaging, right? Just colors and things. What other considerations, and the, low-hanging fruit to, things, fringe things that we should be thinking about. What should, brands be considering, as far as localizing for where they're going?
Well, the whole go-to-market process, Todd, so are you're going to have online sales, you're going to have offline sales. Okay, great. So you're doing online sales. You have your own branded website. You're going to be servicing those consumers locally through a warehouse in Japan, or you can be shipping products from the United States. Are you going to be working with Amazon globally? Are you going to be working with Rakuten in Japan, or others, and then your Coupang in Korea, then the Alibabas or the JDs in China? So what is your online strategy going to be? That's going to be in-house or through third party. And then, for the offline business, are you wholesaling to department stores and retail chains and mom and pop? Or do you have a retail strategy? Are you going to be operating those retail points yourself? Or are you going to be appointing franchisees or retail partners to reach your consumers? So I think those are some real 30,000 feet level questions you need to ask is, what is that best strategy, and where is your company currently sitting? Do you have the resources and the finances to do so? So certainly for a small or medium-sized company breaking out internationally, the first thought isn't, oh, hey, let's open a subsidiary in Japan and start hiring people and leasing an office. You're usually finding a third-party partner, distributor, agent that you contract with, giving exclusive rights to, and they're well capitalized. They understand your brand, they understand your industry, and then they're able to execute that go-to-market strategy, whether it's online or offline.
What about a couple of other things on the, wouldn't want to call it the negative side of things, but the underbelly of maybe e-commerce, which is complaints and returns? How do you prepare and organize for that as well when you are just seemingly going so far away?
2 words: good luck. It's just So the more local you can be for those returns. I mean, the consumer doesn't want to ship the product back to the United States if they're sitting in Tokyo or Shanghai or Seoul. They're going to do it once, they're going to do it twice, and then you're done. So many companies have localized with a 3PLs, or you're working with the Coupangs, Alibabas, and the Rakutens, and so you have your inventory that's local, so you can deliver quicker. I mean, nobody's going to wait. Nobody's going to buy online in Tokyo and say, oh, our delivery is going to be in 10 days. It's just not going to happen. So if you want to beat your competition, you need to go to where the markets are. So you better have your inventory nearby to where the consumers are. And then, I call that fish where the fish are. If that's where your fish are, then you got to be close to it. And then you got to handle the returns there as well.
Yeah, I mean, has that ever seeped into the marketing or messaging in any way, shape, or form? Because I know that if I'm looking at something, let's say I'm using AliExpress, right? And I know where it's coming from, and I know it's going to take a while to get to me, and I have a lower level of trust, and I have a higher level of resistancy to purchase, because if I don't like it, I'm pretty sure I'm just stuck with it. There's no way I'm going to return and get a refund, right? Now, do you need to, do you think it's worthwhile for brands to think about, assuaging the concerns of the customers in those areas? Or do we just kind of like push it off to the side and not worry about it?
Yeah, it's sort of like this, Todd. Oh, hey, I'm on Tmall, the global marketplace. And so great. Now I've got 1.3 odd billion eyeballs looking at my product on Tmall, but my inventory is sitting in Chicago. You sort of like halfway. So good luck with that. Unless you're selling something that's so unique and people must have it, gotta have it. It's likely that your competition here in the United States or competition from wherever has beaten you to the punch and set up inventory in or much closer to those consumers.
Okay, we're going to end part 1 with Bill Tung, localizing for consumers in Japan right there. Join us next week for part 2. Growing a company is hard. Doing it in a foreign market, exponentially so. The best piece of advice I can give you is not to do it alone. When you start looking at the Asia Pacific region for further expansion possibilities, and I sincerely hope you do, make sure you choose the right partners to do it with. My good friends at WPIC Marketing and Technologies have almost 20 years of experience helping brands, just like yours, enter China, Japan, and Southeast Asia. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Negotiation, and if you're interested in being a guest or want to connect with me or any of our team, please reach out to us at podcast@wpic.co, and be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.